Hello, and welcome to Law Talk. My name is John Celebrezzi, and I'm the co-founder of the Celebrezzi-Zangi Community Legal Education Project, as we call it, CZ-CLEP for short. Our organization provides continuing education about the judiciary and legislature to attorneys, judges, government officials, and the general public. As a career educator, I recognize early on how important legal matters are and how they impact our lives. I am the nephew of the late Anthony J. Celebrezzi, who was the popular 5-term mayor of Cleveland and a member of President Kennedy's cabinets. As a tribute to his lifetime commitment to the legal process, we dedicate this show.
In the first segment of this 10th anniversary Law Talk special, John hosts his partner, attorney Mark Zangi. This segment is dedicated to the motivation of these two attorneys to create a nonprofit organization dedicated to legal education. Let's join John as he and his co-founder discuss the early days of CZ and take a trip down memory lane, revisiting a few episodes of Law Talk past.
Mark, welcome to Law Talk.
Well, thank you, John. I'm happy to be here.
Well, you've been the silent partner here for the last decade, but you obviously, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have Celebrezzi-Zangi Community Legal Education Project.
That's true.
And we're reminiscing a little bit today. Today we're doing the first segment of a 10-year anniversary show, as you well know. Through the years, we have done a lot of Law Talk episodes. So what we're trying to do is a conglomeration of a lot of shows to give our viewers kind of a smattering of what we've been up to over the the last 10 years. Time's gone by pretty fast, hasn't it?
It is really hard that it's been 10 years. It's hard to believe that it's been 10 years.
Yeah, they say, Mark, time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
Well, I thought about a good place to start, and my viewers need to know that they've always seen me on television, but you've always been the guy in the background, but there's never been anything that of the planning part of this from the inception that you weren't in on, as well as helped write some things. So I thought a good place to start today would be our mission. And I think we've done a pretty good job through the years of sticking with it, but I'm sure you remember it. You helped me, we wrote it together. The Celebrezzi-Zangi Community Legal Education Project, CZ-CLEP, is devoted to the education of legal matters. Driven by the public's keen interest in our legal judicial system, CZ-CLEP is dedicated to educational endeavors aimed at enhancing the understanding of all citizens regardless of age, education, and or occupation. What do you think?
I agree 100% with that. And I think that our organization has done a really good job in the past 10 years of implementing that mission statement.
I don't think we ever lost our way, Mark.
No?
I mean, if you look at the host of, I use the word host, I guess I was the host, but my host of our guests, the numerous guests we had, people come in from all aspects of the legal community to discuss what they do. We've had judges, as you well know, a Supreme Court justice. We've also had court stenographer. I had the county prosecutor from Medina here, a member of the state school board, but we've never lost sight of education.
That's correct.
What this was all about, and it's been the goal of our 501c3 not-for-profit corporation, which of course you helped me put together all those years ago. Well, okay, I think we've done good. I think our mission statement describes us, and it still does. I guess we should probably talk a little bit about the fact our viewers probably know this. We should tell them anyway. We're a couple of non-traditional students, weren't we?
That is true. As you know, I didn't go to law school until I was 45, and you had retired from working in the city of Findlay School District.
Yeah.
So, as non-traditional students returning to school, becoming attorneys later in life, that statement reflects, the mission statement reflects many of our life experiences.
I agree. You were the youngster. I started law school when I was 57. We actually started out together at Ohio Northern University.
That's correct.
Institution which you graduated from. Unfortunately, I had sort of a detour, and I went to another law school. However, Northern has always been near and dear because that was Uncle Tony's alma mater,
Right.
and over the years we've had students from Ohio Northern on the show, and well, it's kind of our favorite law school too.
True.
So,
True.
but that's where we met up all those years ago. Well, that's about 18 years ago now. And I value our friendship over those years. You worked in sales, right?
Yes, I actually spent close over 20 years working in sales. First, I worked for a company that designed and built machinery, primarily for the ceramic industry, and then I worked for a company that was a distributor of motion control products. So we did everything at that company that had to do with the movement of air or hydraulic or any kind of motion, whether it be linear or rotary type motion. So.
Did you ever see the impact of the legal profession
Oh, my goodness,
on
yes.
your customers? And
Even before I even had any, started my legal training and what have you, we were preparation of contracts, settling of, let's say, disputes, so that it wouldn't go to court,
Sure,
in case
sure.
something happened or what have you. So
Yeah.
I really did get a good taste of how legal issues impact public education.
well, I think that's probably one of the reasons we were attracted to one another. We had both been around for a while. Interestingly enough, we're both trained paralegals before we became lawyers.
That's
right?
correct, yeah.
And but I, as you mentioned earlier, I worked for the Findlay City Schools for on and off for about 30 years. I did go to another neighboring school, Vic Van Buren. I was high school principal there for I think 5 years. But I worked as a school teacher. I taught social studies for about 10 years, and then I became assistant principal, and eventually I retired as an assistant superintendent of the district. And during those times, I did contract negotiation. Oh gosh. Huge building projects, preparation of specifications, which as a salesperson you were well aware of how
That's
that all
correct.
worked.
Yeah.
So I mean, we both had our share of legal dealings even before we became lawyers. But I think it was quite a feat for us to actually become lawyers, and something I'm very proud of.
That's true. And I think you know the story of when my wife, of course, and your wife, my wife Pam and your wife Nancy have always been very supportive of these activities. And you know the story that Pam said after she got her master's degree and had a nice job and what have you. And I was staring at, my mid-40s. She said, you've always wanted to go to law school. I don't want to hear you complain when you're 65 that you never did. So I did.
Well, we should probably make the disclaimer right now to both of our wives. They certainly were very patient with us.
That's true.
In taking on that. Do you remember where we first discussed CZ?
Yes. Actually, it was at a Bob Evans restaurant. I don't recall which one because I know that you've eaten in probably every Bob Evans restaurant that exists.
Yeah, Bob Evans is one of my favorite restaurants. Actually, for the record, it was not too far from your house in Mount Vernon. That's where you were working at the time.
Oh, that's
and,
true.
It was on Interstate 71, and I actually passed that restaurant on a pretty regular basis. But it was actually in that restaurant that I think we started to do some serious talk about putting this together, and that's going back 10 years ago. We put together our legal training. Certainly helped us. We not only did we get our mission statement written, but we worked on this together. It took a while, but we got our 50c3 status. We set up a corporation. We did all of those things that go along with it, and then later on we even did more. We copyrighted some parts of our show. So I guess we used our training. Okay. Well, once again, reminiscent about 10 years though, Mark, and of course I've had the pleasure of being the host, but I've always sent copies of the shows to you when we're done. I didn't really count them, but I think we got quite a library of shows from a lot of legal professions. So,
yes, my goodness.
did you ever figure out why I was turned out to be the host?
Well, two things. I know
Go
that
ahead,
it
tell 'em.
shouldn't it shouldn't
Go ahead,
surprise
go ahead.
anybody that has watched John. He has a very natural presence in front of the camera, and he has a very natural presence in your ability to people. And I think part of that is the background that you had in the school system. You were dealing with the community.
Oh yeah.
You were from top to bottom, right to left, you name it. You were dealing with members of the community, and so I think that was that has assisted you in your legal career. And the other thing is, I know that you were a big fan all these years of Law and Order, and that you should continue to watch that. You probably watch repeats.
I do,
and stuff like that. So I think that's those two reasons there are the
guilty as charged. Gunsmoke, Columbo, and Law and Order are my three favorite television. However, in all fairness to you and everybody else, through the years I've offered on more than one occasion if you wanted to host a show.
That's
but
true.
Of course, your career has kept you pretty busy. But that invitation was always there. But I feel we have worked on the project together. Well. What do you think? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think we ought to take a look at a few of our shows. And
Okay.
I would ask of you, over the years, do you have a favorite?
Yeah, that's a tough question. It really is a tough question. I think that's kind of a pat, politically correct answer, but in all honesty with you, I can't actually say I have a favorite because I feel that what made this sort of special for me, Mark, was how easy it was. I think if you ever played in a school play when you were a kid, you might have been fretting about forgetting your lines or something like that. I never played in a school play, by the way, so I can't speak from experience. However, I never felt that way with any of our guests. I talked to them, Kate Feeks talked to them, our reporter, but generally when I got somebody in that chair and they start talking about what they do as a judge, a stenographer, a law student from Ohio Northern, it just flowed very nicely. So, I can't really say that I have a favorite. I suppose, if I had a pick, maybe as much the attorney as well as the subject, but we had Richard Marco Jr. on back in November of 2010, and the topic of the show was adoption. And it was a very, very interesting show. And then I learned when Rick told me later on, he said, well, the November is adoption month. I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. And so we have made a point, again, promoting legal education, of running that particular episode. Usually every November we'll let it run. So,
well, let's take a peek at that show then.
Okay.
There
All right.
is two types of custody that a parent has of a child. One is temporary custody, which means the day-to-day type of things where the child is living with you and you're making decisions and you're controlling what they do, what school they go to, what friends they can have, that sort of thing, those decisions. The other type of custody is called permanent custody, and that is your rights as a parent. Oftentimes when you hear about a child being taken away from a parent, they're taking away temporary custody and placing that temporary custody somewhere else. Permanent custody is the actual termination, with adoption, is the actual termination of the biological parent's rights as a parent and the replacement of those rights with somebody else. In severe cases where you have abused children, the Department of Job and Family Services becomes the actual parent or the one in permanent custody of the child. With adoption, it's a happier ending, and that is the child actually acquires persons that are their permanent parents.
I see. So actually, Rick, when I was thinking about the show today,
What would you say was your most unique show over the past 10 years?
Now that one's easy. Now that is a much easier. That's a much easier question for me to answer. Favorite and unique are two different things. However, it was the only time it happened, so it has to be unique. And I had the opportunity of having a mother and daughter on two separate shows. The mother was Miss Kate Belfance, who is a local attorney who specializes in bankruptcy, and we did a whole show on bankruptcy. And I believe she works as a trustee, and Kate knows bankruptcy. Trust me on that. And she very, very educational. Interestingly enough, though, her daughter, Eve Belfance, at the time we had her on, was a member of the 9th District Court of Appeals, and we are in the 9th District here, which it takes in Summit County, Medina, Wayne County, I think in Lorain County. And it wasn't too long after she was elected to that post that she joined me. It wasn't atypical for us to invite judges, particularly when they first took office, to come in and talk about their new jobs. But I never had the mother-daughter duo. I mean, I never did, and I was really, not only was it fun for me, but when the final product was done, I think we certainly met our mission as far as expounding some pretty good stuff on legal education.
Great. Let's have a look at that segment.
And what the public should know is that the law provides that your pension is exempt from bankruptcy. In other words, if you file bankruptcy, you don't lose everything.
I see.
There are certain assets that you have that are exempt. And those assets are just a few. I'm going to mention just a few.
Go ahead.
You get $23,250 in a homestead. So if you have a house that has $23,250 in equity, you can file bankruptcy.
The role of the court, the role of the judge, is to examine from above, if you will, whether the trial court judge made a mistake. Simple. It's almost like an instant replay of a sports event.
A sports event, yeah.
Where you
good one.
are
good analogy.
Looking at the replay, and often, or let's say the U.S. Open, there was just the tennis match where somebody questions what the call was, and then they replay and you can see the ball bounce, and it's, oh, no, that was out, or no, that was actually in.
On the subject to unique, Mark, albeit many of our guests were prominent judges, and I said we had a Supreme Court justice on our show, but not all of our guests were judges per se, or attorneys for that matter. We had other legal professionals, and we had Leanne Garrow Haswell on, and she appeared on Law Talk in October of 2012 with her trusty, what I call her trusty steno machine. She literally had it here in the studio.
Did she take notes?
I don't know. I never asked her that. Leanne was then, and she still is, a court reporter in Judge Kimbler's courtroom here in Medina County, courtroom 2. However, it's not the same Judge Kimbler.
Oh, what do you mean?
Well, interestingly enough, Judge James Kimbler retired in 2014, I believe, and the seat was taken by his wife, Joyce Kimbler, who has also been one of our guests on Law Talk. So over the years, we had both Jim and Joyce on, but Leanne served as a she served as a court reporter for both of them, and a lot of people sometimes don't think about court reporters much. I guess those of us in the profession do, but they get to hear it all.
Oh, yes, they do.
And Common Pleas Court, she has she's done the steno work for murder trials that went on for, when she put the transcript together, literally thousands of pages.
Sure.
And she explained the intricacies of that profession in a way that I gotta say, I learned something too. And she was a very personable guest, and it was really fun having her on the show. But there's an example of, I guess you would call a non-lawyer that we had as a guest.
Great. Let's take a look at that show.
Okay.
What I do is I do get on the bench with the judge because I'm short and I need to hear what everybody is saying. And we only have sidebars when there's a jury because it's, like you said, law that they don't want the jury to hear. And so when there's a sidebar, I
You
go
gotta
up
move.
there, I move.
You would carry it with you?
I carry my machine with me and I get up on the bench and they discuss whatever it is they discuss, and then the judge will make a ruling and he'll either allow what they want to
Sure.
discuss in front of the jury or
I imagine that's the stuff, Leanne, that when things do come up on appeal, that the appellant judges are looking pretty closely at,
Exactly.
because there's a point of law in there somewhere.
exactly,
Okay.
right.
All right. Sometimes we hear the term stenographer. Is that the same thing?
Yeah, a stenographer and a court reporter, it's synonymous. It's the same thing.
Okay. All right. Well,
Right.
but it's, sometimes in our law office, we're having a deposition, and we have to have.
Okay. You had mentioned earlier that the different types of guests that we've had on the show.
Yeah.
And that some were not lawyers, Leanne being one
Sure,
of them.
sure.
How about some of the others?
Well, I mean, Kate Feeks, our reporter, was very helpful in doing this. Sometimes, we would actually make a concerted effort to go out and maybe find folks that might bring a different perspective. For example, we had a member of the State Board of Education on several years ago. Elections, as you well know, run hand in hand with the legal profession. Obviously, judges are elected for 6-year terms. So we got the idea one day of approaching our local Board of Elections right here in Medina County, and we invited Carol Lawler and Carol Gurney, who at the time were the director and the director of the Medina Board of Elections. Whole different perspective. I mean, no legalese talk or anything of that, but again, learning about a fundamental right that we have, the right to vote, and the intricacies of what goes on behind the scenes before everybody turns up to pull the lever. I don't know if they pull the lever anymore, but so yeah, I mean, there would be an example of two guests. They came as a pair, both the director and the deputy director of the Board of Elections. So
It's interesting that you had them on because in my practice as an assistant prosecutor for the past 7 years in Licking County and Muskingum County, I did civil work, or continue to do civil
remember,
division
yeah.
work. And one of our clients, of course, is the Board of Elections, and so I've had a lot of familiarity with,
Sure.
working with boards of elections.
no, you advise them.
As their legal counsel.
Yeah.
So, we have the opportunity. Let's go ahead and show a portion of that show with Carol Lawler and Carol Gurney.
Okay,
Good.
good.
An application?
Correct. Everyone who votes absentee, and you actually are doing this whether you're voting by mail or person, fills out an absentee application form.
Yeah.
And that basically is asking for your name, your birth date, a form of ID, typically, which is either the last 4 digits of your driver's license or, the last 4 digits of your social security number or your driver's license number, and then your signature. And then using that information, we validate all of that information against our records before
Okay.
issuing a ballot, an early absentee ballot.
So somehow, before I could vote absentee, the end game here, I have to have this application in my hand and I have to fill it out.
Correct.
All right, if I'm going to have to go down to the Board of Elections to get this application, why don't I just register to vote while I'm down there? Well, I guess I am already registered to vote.
But that would make sense to do. There is a time frame where actually people can register to vote and vote absentee.
Okay, we're going to get to that. All right, because that's interesting.
But the way
Well,
that people are getting their absentee
how-
applications this time is
Yeah.
actually through a mass mailing that the Secretary of State has done for all registered voters in the state of
Oh.
Ohio.
Okay, because that's different. That's new.
That is
Lots
brand
of
new.
new things going on in
Yes.
your lives, aren't there?
Yes,
Quite
lots
a
of
bit.
new-
All right, so
All right. John, you've been the primary host of Law Talk over the last 10 years. In that time, what did you find the most interesting thing about the show?
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a fair question. I mean, I never, as I said earlier, I can't actually call a favorite. Leanne was somewhat unique because she, of her, her skill, her profession as a stenographer. But probably what I found really interesting, and it was a little bit like being a school teacher, Mark. You got to have well, you're supposed to, I always did, have a lesson plan of what you're going to do. And well, you sort of gauge each day on how well the kids picked up on it or how it went, and some days were better than others. But I will tell you, over the last decade that I've done this show, we always have, and that's why we have the clipboards, about approximately 10 questions that there's never been a time where our guests didn't know what they were going to be asked. I mean, this is not a political show. But it just always amazed me how the time went by so fast. I mean, you know, you think this is going to be like pulling teeth or something, but it's not. I mean, it just, first of all, the people are here because they want to be here. And two, they're excited about what they do. And I mean, even people, I had the former county prosecutor, and I think he was county prosecutor here for 28 years. I mean, it's not like he was new to the show. Judge Kimbler, 30 years.
Sure.
But was probably every bit as excited being on Law Talk after sitting on the bench for all those years. So, yeah, that's what I really found that to be pretty interesting, pretty fun, actually.
Good. The questions that you had, is that's why you always use the clipboard?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, as you know, there's, well, we use it for a couple other logistical purposes, but by way of just a little bit of history, when we first started to do this, we made cue cards, and we literally set them up in here, and we didn't have a teleprompter, but we had cue cards, and I would read them. Frankly, I never thought I did a very good job at it, but
I think it's difficult to do that, to read off of a script like that.
As I look at the old shows, I could see where, you know, you could see my eyes just following them. So now we have what we colloquially call happy talk, and usually our announcer is announcing our guests as they did today. And then when I pick up the clipboard, as I told you earlier and all my other guests, that was the signal that, you know, we're on. So the clipboard has served a couple of purposes.
Cool. All righty. And when you put the clipboard down, we're done.
We're done.
So do we have some more time to run at least one more segment?
Well, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Typically our Law Talk show, Mark, is a half-hour show. And you know, we try to keep it constrained to probably between 25 and 27 minutes. However, as you know, this show is a special show. It'll actually be a 2-hour special. So I mean, we have the luxury of some time here. So yeah, if you want to take want to talk about another show, it was very interesting. It was a very interesting topic, and it was on the topic of mediation. And we do have here in Medina County, we do have a mediation program that is actually affiliated with our common pleas courts.
Yeah. Good. Can you explain a little bit further about that?
Sure. As you well know, how long have you been practicing now?
Oh my gosh, I'll be 14. Yeah, it's 14 years
14,
that
okay.
I've been practicing. That was 7 years as a public defender and 7 years as an assistant prosecutor.
Well, so during all those years that you practice, you know that whether it was civil or criminal,
Right.
The profession is all about conflict. I mean, there's a plaintiff and a defendant. There's the state of Ohio and a defendant, but there's going to be some dispute.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a mediation program in civil matters gives people the opportunity for, let's say I was representing you, you were hurt in an automobile accident. Of course, when I talked to you, you told me, John, you know, I was really hurt bad and I really need a considerable amount of money. And that could be, as you probably know yourself, that could be almost from the ridiculous to the sublime. But
Sure.
nonetheless,
Yes,
that's why you
absolutely.
hired a lawyer. And then, of course, the insurance company, who's probably going to pay, has a whole different view on this thing.
Absolutely.
So there's your conflict situation. And of course, if you wind up in court, you have to file a filing fee. You have stenographer, as we talked about earlier. there's a lot of litigation expenses. So what the courts
Absolutely.
do, at least our court does here, and it's an excellent program, they encourage the parties to go to mediation. In other words, they get in there with a mediator who maybe could find middle ground, and maybe you can get this settled before you actually have to take it all the way to jury.
Right.
Now,
And litigation can be very, very expensive.
very expensive. I mean,
So,
it's
and
no-
mediation programs has been my experience as well, that they do save both parties money, and they save valuable court time as well.
Yeah, and that's so. And we're fortunate here in Medina County. We have an excellent program. Now it's run by a retired judge. His name is retired Judge Kelly. However, we did a show on it, Mark. It's been several years ago now. It was 2011, and the guy that was running it then was an excellent mediator. His name was Bruce Francis.
Okay.
And Bruce was kind enough to be my guest on Law Talk, and we put a half-hour show. That has been probably a really good tool. I mean, I know in my practice, sometimes when I'm talking to a client, I say, well, you know, if you might want to go to our website or go to YouTube and just watch the show, because it might be very helpful to understand, what this process is. It does work. It really does work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, well, it sounds very interesting. Let's take a look at that segment then.
Cases, the personal injury cases. The neighbors, it's a little
story.
different.
I see.
But
But that's interesting too. I mean,
Oh,
a little
those
change
are
of
the-
behavior there, maybe on both parts.
a lot of emotion on those cases.
Yeah, I never really thought about that. So you get into that as well.
Yes.
Okay, that would come to you from the court again on on the civil side?
Yes, those are cases. These aren't domestic relations cases.
Right.
These are civil cases where, you've got a neighbor next door and there's something that goes terribly wrong. It builds up usually over a series of months or even years, and it comes to the point where somebody goes and sees the attorney, and a case winds up getting filed, and the court will refer them in.
But it's a lawsuit.
It's absolutely a lawsuit, yeah.
see.
A judge, from time to time, Judge Lone will refer a case as well. So
Oh,
we have
from-
will contests that come in.
A will contest, a probate matter, it could come your way as well.
Absolutely.
I see. So you get to see quite a variety here. I mean, I guess I most of the time I've seen you, again, using myself, it's usually been a car accident and it's been just about money, but it's not all about that.
No, not necessarily. We see quite a variety. Certainly there are the workers' comp cases, the personal injury cases where it is very much about money, but it's the full gamut. Anything that could be filed in the common police court, we eventually see before it goes to trial.
Is that mandatory, Bruce? I mean, is the judge pretty much telling the litigants at some point in time, I'm assigning this to mediation?
I think they both handle that a little differently. I think Judge Collier relies maybe a little more on the attorneys to tell him that they would like to go to mediation,
I
or
see.
they think their client or the case could benefit from mediation. I think Judge Kimbler takes the position that just about any case could benefit from mediation, and so I think he's a little more generous with the time.
Well, Mark, time flies like the 10 years went by fast. So did our show time here. And I guess you know what it means when I put the clipboard down.
That's right.
The end of our show. However, we have one item of business I would like to indulge you just a little bit farther. We're glad to have you here today. Not only have you been my co-founder and confidant and source of encouragement and best of all my friend for the last decade, but you have volunteered your time to be a member of the Celebrezze Zangi Community Legal Education Board of Directors. And for the benefit of our viewers, Mark has to show up annually, sit through a meeting. Well, it's like being a school or any other board member of the Board of Elections. There's some work goes along with it. So Mark, to offer you some kind of thank you for a decade of service, let's see what I got here for you. CZ, our organization, would like to give you that.
Yes.
And why don't you open that up and see what you think.
Oh, look at that. put that around here. It says CZ, commendation of Mark A. Zangi, Esquire, for his devotion to legal education as a member of the Celebrezzi Zangi Community Legal Education Project, Incorporated, Board of Directors for the past 10 years. Well, thank you very much, John.
Well,
That's
congratulations.
very kind
Mark.
of you. That's very kind.
In this second segment of the 10th Anniversary Law Talk special, John hosts longtime CZ reporter Katie Freaks. Kate has written numerous articles about John's guests over the years, called In the Spotlight, a piece she used to follow up on nearly every Law Talk episode, writing background information about judges, attorneys, and others who appeared as John's guests on the show. Let's join John and Kate as they look back over the last 10 years.
Kate, welcome back.
Thank you, John. It's glad to be here.
Boy, oh boy, time flies, isn't it? We've been working on this project for 10 years.
10 years.
Okay, well, I got a lot of questions for you today.
Okay.
We're going to kind of take a little trip down memory lane of some of the things that we worked on together. You being our trusty CZ reporter met and wrote about a lot of people, didn't you?
I did, yes.
Okay. Well, okay, let's get going. Over the last 10 years, I wrote this down so I wouldn't forget to say this to you. But over the last 10 years, CZ sponsored numerous law-related programs, including Law Talk, which is what we are today, our monthly cable show, continuing legal education for attorneys. You helped with that. CZ Scholars, youth scholarships. You interviewed all of our recipients, wrote articles, nice articles about them.
Fun.
As CZ's official reporter, giving you the opportunity to meet and write about some pretty interesting people. Okay, so what'd you think of this job?
It was so much fun. I really loved it.
You really did?
Yes. I really
Okay.
did.
Well,
Very
we're going to
exciting.
get into why you loved it here in a few minutes, obviously. But before we do that, because this is one of the few opportunities that I've actually got you on the show with me, oftentimes you were coordinating, getting the guest here, and then following up and doing
Right.
all the work that goes along with that. So while I have this opportunity, why don't you take this opportunity to tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
So I have lived in Medina my entire life. I went to St. Francis for elementary school and then Medina High School. And then I went off to the University of Akron for college. And I studied mass media communications.
Oh.
So that was very helpful for this.
So you
CZ
studied to be a reporter?
I did, yes.
How about that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that came in
exciting.
pretty handy for, well, we'll try to count up before this segment's over how many articles you actually wrote and where they're at, but we'll save that for a few minutes. But you not only helped me get the guest here, but then you either phone interviewed them or visited them after the show, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, all right. All right. Other than your education, you want to talk about your family a little bit?
So I have two sons, William and James Feeks, and James is 14 and Williams is 11, and my husband Jim, and we all live in Medina. And James is starting as a freshman in high school. I know.
That's
and
unbelievable.
William will be starting at Claggett for junior high this year. So
I could remember sometimes stopping by your house to drop off something related to the show when
they're babies.
Yeah, they were. Well, time flies when we're having fun, huh?
I know.
Okay. What are you doing these days? I mean, by way of a job.
So from beginning of February, I have started a position at the Medina County Courthouse as Judge Kimbler's administrative assistant in the Common Pleas Court.
I see. Wow, you kind of went full circle, didn't you?
I did.
You started out 10 years ago, or whenever we got going with this, and we'll talk about the CZ Reporter in a little bit, planning yourself probably in that same courtroom.
I did
even though
many
it was
times.
a different Judge Kimbler, though, wasn't it?
It was
Judge James Kimbler.
Right.
But you work for Judge Joyce Kimbler now.
Correct.
I see.
Yes.
Okay, well, they're husband and wife. Same courtroom, though, right?
Same courtroom.
Same courtroom. Okay, where you wrote some pretty interesting stories about actual trials.
I did.
Okay.
I watched very many trials and learned so much through all those articles that I wrote.
Well, I guess your CZ experience has been somewhat helpful to you with your new job.
Very helpful.
Well, we wish you the very best of luck with that.
Thank you.
And you're still in the court system. You were really in the court system. You get to meet jurors on a regular basis, don't you?
I do.
Yeah.
So I basically get them all checked in and situated in the courtroom, and then whatever needs that they may have. And just when the judge is ready, we get the jury back in and seated.
How about that? How about that? Remember when we did that project on juror conduct?
Yes.
Yeah, well, now you actually get to see the jurors, don't you?
Yes.
I remember we did that. We even had it up on our website. Yeah, okay, better quit reminiscing here. All right, so you better tell we'd like for you to tell my readers how you got started as the CZ reporter.
So CZ started, it was an online newspaper, and so I basically would decide what kind of articles I was looking to write. I would go sit into the courtrooms and watch some trials, or I'd go around the courthouse and interview just different employees, judges, attorneys, just to get some interesting stories about people that work at the courthouse to educate the community.
I see. Well, that's where you met all kinds of people.
I did, and I
Judges,
learned about so many different positions.
Judges, attorneys. Well, let me ask you this question. I mean,
Appellate
it's just
judges.
yeah. It'd be okay. Rather than me put words in your mouth, I mean, this is probably a good place to start. What would you say was, I kind of hate to say favorite, but maybe the most interesting interviewee that you had during this period?
I would say the Speaker of the House, House of Representatives, William Batchelder.
Mr.
I really
Batchelder.
liked, yeah.
Yeah, pretty interesting guy there. What do you remember about him?
Just how calm, and he was so polite, and he shared so many interesting stories with me. So it was a really interesting article to write.
Yeah, I bet it was, and that article is still available. We'll tell our viewers where they can see it if they want.
Sure.
Eventually, though, as time went by, and of course, all things changed, but you sort of settled into a role of writing what we call spotlight pieces.
Yes.
Can you tell our readers what that means?
So the spotlight pieces were basically, when Law Talk, I would find the people for you to interview, and on the website we would have the spotlight pieces, which basically introduced who you would be interviewing for that month, and give a little story about who they were, and biography about their lives and their educational backgrounds, and just let the viewers know that what this show and interview with you on Law Talk would be about.
Okay. All right. Well, that was the follow-up to get my guest here, and then
Right.
you wrote a story about him.
Yes.
I wrote a question down here, Kate. Can you remember the positions and background of some of the people you wrote about? Of course, we know the speaker, but can any other one come into mind? I mean, really, I won't expect you to remember
Some of the
all
guests.
Yeah.
I interviewed some appellate judges, the Medina Common Pleas judges, Muni Court judges, and attorneys, and it was quite a wide range. Law
Didn't you
students.
once interview a Supreme Court justice?
Yes, I did.
Judge McGee Brown.
Yep.
How about that?
Absolutely.
Okay. How'd you get along with her?
Very well. So
Really?
nice. Yes.
Nice lady, huh? All right, got to shift gears. Kind of relevant to you now that you have a high school student in your house, but we eventually moved into the scholarship business. Kids that maybe would be interested in pursuing a college career, post-secondary, post-high school career, some law-related field, not necessarily just to be a lawyer. And we started doing that, I think, about 3-4 years ago. Tell my viewers about that. That's kind of interesting.
So the scholarships we did were about 3 years ago, like you said, and it started at Cloverleaf High School.
Okay.
And that was the high school that Judge Kimbler, James Kimbler, retired judge,
Yeah,
he graduated from. And so he presented to those students, I think it was 2 or 3 to that school. And then we had in Hancock County, Judge Rootson.
Reg Routson, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, he's
And-
common pleas judge there, sure.
Yes, he did some scholarships for us. I think those equated to $2,000, so
I see.
those students did well. And then you had presented some from Revere High School,
Yeah,
where
my
you
brother-
graduated.
My brother, officer, my late brother was a police officer, Vince Celebrezzi.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so what did you think about this? Oh, I don't know. Should we say new event that we added to our repertoire of things?
Which one?
The scholarships.
Oh, yes. It was wonderful. I basically we would present them to just the brightest and the best
Sure.
students of each high school.
But you actually got to talk to the kids then?
Yes, so I would interview them and kind of a spotlight piece on that and explaining it was really exciting to see where they were going to go in their future.
Sure.
And what they learned to get that scholarship and how hard they worked to do so.
Yeah.
So it was exciting.
Kind of a new dimension there. Well, that's certainly, I mean, as the co-founder of CZ, I mean, I'm proud of the whole experience and the fine work you did for our skate during the last 10 years. But
you.
that's kind of a high point with me personally, particularly with my brother's scholarship.
Right.
Kate, is there some place that our viewers could go to see all these articles that you wrote over the years?
Absolutely. It's www.czclep.org.
I see.
Is where they're located.
And that's our website. Mm-hmm. Well, Kate, last I checked, there were quite a few stories up on that website.
Yes, I think it was around like 50 we had.
Really?
Yeah, starting from 2010, I believe.
Okay. This is going to fall right in. I mean, you wrote about this too, but I think it's a fair question to ask you because you really were the driving force on this. What was Ask the Judge all about?
So Ask the Judge was another show that CZ had started, and basically I would go out to the streets and ask the public if they had any questions or things about the law that they've always wondered about and would really like to hear the answers to. So I would interview them and then bring those questions back to our studios, and we would ask a judge, a common pleas judge, and it was retired Judge James Kimbler. Out of Wadsworth, we had Judge McIlvain, and then our common pleas judge today, Judge Collier.
Judge Collier, yeah.
So
okay.
they would answer the questions.
But you actually found people on the street, got a question or questions from them,
Yes.
brought them back, and we put the whole thing together so they could watch television and actually see the judge asking their question.
Yes. And
And
answering. Yes.
And that took a little coordination now, didn't it?
Yeah. It was
Wow.
really fun.
And you thought it was fun to boot.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I guess so you're right. Well, I mean, Judge McIlvain is actually a municipal court judge, but right here in Wadsworth. And then, of course, the two common pleas
The
judges.
two common pleas, yes.
But I mean, but that's not the important thing that I want to ask you. But this is kind of important. Did you have any trouble finding participants, finding people that would actually do this?
Never did. It's really funny because I would just walk up and ask some questions, and they would say, I do want to know the answer to this, and
Did
I've
you ever-
always wondered, or
Did you ever talk to them after they saw the show?
I did.
Well,
So
what
they
did-
thought it was a really fun idea. They loved that they could get the answers straight from the judge, and that it's correct, and you have the solid answer to what you were wondering about in the law.
Well, that was kind of a cool thing we did.
It was.
So we're gonna show now. Let's take a look at our first Ask the Judge, which you mentioned was retired Judge James
Correct.
Kimbler.
Yeah.
So we'll let our viewers take a look at
And
that
Judge
one.
Kimbler, the first question I have comes from James.
Hi, I'm James. I go to Heritage Elementary School. My question is, where do you grow up?
James actually grew up in Lodi, Ohio, which was my hometown. I was born in Lodi, and for about a year, a little bit less than that, after I was born, my family lived in Columbus. And then for a couple years, we actually lived in Findlay, where John had lived for a while. And when I was about 3 or 4 years old, we moved to Lodi. And so I've actually been in Medina County about 51 of the 61 years I've been alive. And I actually lived in Lodi from the time I was about 4 until the time I graduated from college when I was 22. So I consider Lodi my hometown.
Right.
And it is my hometown. It's where I was born.
Wow, great. Okay, the next question I have is from Jack.
Hi, Judge Kimbler. My name is Jack. I attend Claggett Middle School, and I was wondering, what college did you go to?
I went to college at Ohio University from 1967 to 1971, and then I went to law school at Case Western Reserve from 1971 to 1974. I was admitted to the bar in 1974, and I practiced in Sandusky from 74 to 76. And then for about 2 years, I practiced in Norwalk. And then in '78, I actually came back to my hometown, Lodi. I'd opened up my own practice, and I was that's where I was practicing when I became judge in the Wadsworth Municipal Court back in 1986.
Wow, great. Okay, and next we have Kevin.
Hi, Judge Kimbler. I'm Kevin Schulte, and I go to Medina High School. And my question is, what is a common pleas judge?
That's a good question, because there's actually a lot of judges in Ohio. There's about 650 of us, and we have various kinds of courts. Under the Constitution of the state of Ohio, every county has to have a common pleas court judge. And we get that term probably from New England, or maybe from the East Coast, because Pennsylvania, for example, also refers to its trial judges at the county level as common pleas judges. And there was a common pleas bench that was in London, in England, back at the time of the colonies being formed in America. But what a common pleas court judge does is we have prosecution over all felony crimes that are tried in Medina County or indicted. We do civil lawsuits over $500. We do what's called equity causes of action. And there's actually several divisions to the common pleas court in Medina, for example. There's the Domestic Relations Division, which is actually done by Judge Mary Kovac. There is the Probate Division, which is done by Judge Lone. There is the Juvenile Division, which is done by Judge Lone. And then there's the Common Pleas General Division, which is done by myself and Judge Collier. Mm-hmm. And the best way to think about it is we don't do what everybody else does. That is, we don't do children like the juvenile court does. We don't do divorces like Mary Kovac does. We don't do probate.
Okay, we're back at it again. Our viewers just had, we all had an opportunity to reminisce there about, I guess it was our first Ask the Judge with Judge Kimbler.
That's right.
But we had more. But what, do you remember what the next one was?
So the next one, I believe, was with Judge McIlvain.
Right here from Wadsworth.
Right in Wadsworth.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
He's a municipal judge.
Yes. Very nice.
That one went well?
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point in time, you, Judge McIlvain, and myself wound up in, I think we were at the old studio then, but
it
that
was
makes
the
a
old
difference.
I think, yeah.
But that's how that went down. And the judge was actually answering the questions of the people on the street.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's take a look at that show.
Hi, I'm Becca, and I was wondering, is someone legally required to perform the standard field sobriety test?
Okay, the standard field sobriety test, there's basically three of them. That's the horizontal gaze and nystagmus test, the leg stand, and the walking, or the heel to toe. And the quick answer, are you legally required to do it? The answer is no. There is no legal obligation to take the standard field sobriety test. So when they say the horizontal gaze and nystagmus, that's where the officer will have you stand in front of them, hold your head still, and they'll use a pen or stimulus, hold it about 12 to 14 inches away from your eye, slightly above eye level, and they'll move it to the right and the left. And you're supposed to follow it just with your eyes. Everyone has a natural nystagmus, that your eye jerks. Alcohol enhances it. Normally, it's not visible. Like you and I, we're not drinking. If you moved your eyes, I'm not going to be able to see your nystagmus. If you consume alcohol, it accelerates or magnifies that effect. Okay? And the police have to do it a certain way. Same thing with the one-leg stand. If you stand on one leg, they have you raise one leg 6 inches off the ground, put your arms down, and count 1001, 1002, 1003, up to 1030. Walk the straight line. They have you stand in a position with one leg in front of the other, and they tell you to walk down either a real.
Okay, so I guess we've got two down, and we didn't necessarily save the best for last, but those of you who know Judge Collier,
know that he has a very effervescent personality, and he was a great guest on
He
Law
was a
Talk.
great
I've had him a
guest.
couple times. What'd you think of that one?
He's very exciting judge to watch.
Really?
Yeah, he's got a really fun personality.
Very,
so that was a fun.
very animated.
Yeah.
whatnot.
That was a really fun show to do.
Okay. Well, we're going to give our viewers an opportunity to take a peek at that one
Mark,
as well, Kate.
My question for you today is, what is the most interesting case you've ever had?
I have to tell you, I get this question a lot from people who are interested in the job. We're like, what do you do? What do you like? It's the one that's right in front of me. If you see it this way, every case, this year already, we've had an aggravated murder trial. 2 weeks of an aggravated murder trial. We've had a rape case. We've had a sexual assault case. We've had 3 personal injury cases and a contract claim. But every single one of them shares one thing, and that is the real people. They have real concerns, right? And there are attorneys who are representing them as best they can, and they have a dispute that a jury is going to have to resolve because the parties aren't able to, right? The jury's going to have to decide this thing. And so the interest for me is watching that happen. How the lawyer presents a case, how the jury reacts to that presentation, the physical evidence, the questioning the witnesses, the conflict in what's going on in the courtroom it's like this. It's really exciting. It's really, really fun. And it's fun to watch exactly how that happens. So I have to tell you, the most recent case I finished, which I finished last week, was a week-long case about concrete. $500,000 worth of ready-mix concrete, and who owes them?
Well, Kate, all good things come to an end, just like this segment of our anniversary show. But I do have one more question for you.
What's that, John?
Well, you might find this pretty interesting. But back during your Ask the Judge days, I mean, you played lots of roles, and I guess would say wore a lot of hats.
Yeah.
But if my memory serves me, you actually had a hat.
I did.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of a Frank Sinatra type hat, and it had a little card in it that said press.
It did.
And that was identifying you as our official CZ court reporter.
That's where I got started.
What happened to it?
It's at home in the closet at my house, but it definitely served its purpose as my CZ court reporter hat.
Okay.
It's doing well.
So it's still in your life, right?
Still in my life.
Well, one of these days I'm going to ask you to model that again, Kate. Kate, thanks for being our guest on this segment of
Thank
our
you so
anniversary show. And again, speaking for all of us at CZ, thank you so much for your hard work.
Thank you, John.
It sounds like it turned out to be an interesting adventure for you as well as it did for the rest of us, and I'm certainly glad to report that.
Yes.
So once again, thank you.
Comments made by John's guest on Law Talk are solely those of his guest and do not necessarily reflect the views of Celebrezze Zangi Community Legal Education Project. To view this show and others, go to www.czclep.org. In the Wandsworth area, a complete listing of dates and times of this broadcast, tune in to WCTV Channel 15 or log on to wandsworthcity.com and follow the links to WCTV. At CZ Clep, we're devoted to the education of today's legal issues. Fueled by the public's keen interest in our legal system and current events, CZ Clep is dedicated to the educational venues aimed at enhancing the understanding by all citizens, regardless of age, education, occupation, or wealth. A function of the Celebrezze Zangi Community Legal Education Project.